Hi everyone, it's Lindsay. Welcome back to another video. Today I want to share with you 3 different ways to do some plastic bag smooshing. Here's a look at the stamp sets I'll be using today. They are all from Joy Clear Stamps. The 3 on the left are from the newer release. The one on the right, Chain Breaker, is from an older release. I'll be using it on the inside of the card and I'll show you that later on in the video. Now moving on to the technique, you're going to need some cardstock, a place to put your mediums. I'll share more on that with you in a moment. You're also going to need a baggie. Now you can use your baggie as is and just crumple it up, or you can do what I'll show you in just a moment. Back to the mediums. The first medium I am going to use is going to be watercolor, liquid watercolors preferably. Now, I am using the Hydrus liquid watercolors, but there are so many wonderful companies that have come out with their own line of liquid watercolors. I know Hero Arts did, Tailored Expressions did. You could also use powdered watercolors like the Ken Oliver Color Bursts and mix up some water in those, and that would be great. Now, I added some water to those watercolors, liquid watercolors, and I put them on a palette. To give my baggie some bulk, I'm going to fill it with some tissue paper. This is just going to give me a nice handle, some bulk, different textures are going to come out of it this way. Now, if you wanted to, if you didn't want to go this route, you could also use plastic wrap. I just want to mention that. That is how I originally seen this technique, but I don't like plastic wrap. It drives me crazy and I don't ever have any. So I improvised and this is what I came up with in order to get the same look. So what you want to do is take your baggie and start dipping it in those colors. Then you can just layer them and pounce that bag right on top of your paper. Now the paper I am using is watercolor paper here, and that is because I am using watercolors. You can also use regular cardstock. It's just going to give you a different look and you're not going to get as much blending. So as I layer these up, you'll notice that they are mixing and you're getting those really great textures from when the baggie pulls up off the paper. That is the beauty of this project. You can keep layering and just kind of adding those little textures. If you want more splotches, go with a lighter hand. If you want more really dark bigger splotches, go in with a heavier hand and really push down on that baggie. You have so much control with this technique. Here's a closer look at how this one ended up with the liquid watercolors. I love the blending you get with this. So you want to remember whenever you're doing this technique and you're doing the watercolors on watercolor paper, be sure to use colors that are going to blend nicely. So here I used a pink and a purple, or a pink and a blue, so I got some purples. Make sure you use colors that are going to blend nicely so you don't end up with some mud. To finish this card, I'm using the Gather Together stamp set. I love this one. So the first thing I want to do is go ahead and stamp that church onto some white cardstock with my Memento Tuxedo Black ink. That's my favorite whenever I am doing alcohol marker coloring. I'm also going to use some VersaFine Clear and stamp down one of the sentiments onto this white cardstock. The deal with this sentiment though is I only need that praise. That's the only part of the sentiment I need on the cardstock right now. I'll finish the sentiment later on the front and also the inside of the card. So that's why I am just using that. I'll go ahead and stamp that a few times. I am using my Misty here so I can do some double stamping and get a really nice solid impression. Now for the church, like I said, I stamped it with Memento Tuxedo Black ink so I could do some alcohol marker coloring. Nothing fancy here. If you want to see the coloring, I'll throw that up over on Instagram, which you can find my channel down below. Now, there's a closer look at it all finished, colored up. I did fussy cut that image as well, but I want to mention that Joy Claire Stamps does offer free SVG cut files for all of their stamp sets. You get it automatically as a free download. There's no extra 99 cents or anything like that. So if you have an electronic cutting machine, that is an awesome deal. All right, so with that praise sentiment, I went ahead and just quickly cut it out with my scissors. Now I'm going to finish that sentiment on the front of the card. I went ahead and placed my watercolor panel into my Misty, and I placed that church where I'm going to have it on the end of the card when I place everything down. Then I'll go ahead and use some painter's tape to mask off the part of that sentiment that I want to keep free of any ink. I don't want that to stamp down. So I'm just inking up the top of that sentiment, "Win the Church," and I'll stamp that down again with my Misty. I'm using VersaFine Clear ink to do that stamping, and then I can go ahead and place that praise right underneath that and pop that up with some dimension just to add a little bit more interest to the card. I also popped up the church with some dimensional adhesive and attached the whole panel to an A2 top folding card base. Now for the inside, I'm going to finish off the sentiment and stamp that on the inside of the card. And then because it says the chains break, specifically chains break, imprison, shake, I'm going to go ahead and use that chain breaker stamp set and stamp that right down underneath the finishing sentiment on the inside. Now the great thing about using the Misty, I can stamp this all at once, and I'll be using two different colors. That still doesn't matter. So I'll go ahead and pick up that entire outlay of the card design on the inside with the lid of my Misty, and then I'll start inking up. Now again, I only need the bottom of this sentiment now, so I'm using painter's tape to go ahead and mask off the top portion of that. I'm using VersaFine Clear Nocturne ink on the sentiment and also on the two little where the chains break and you have those little lines coming out from it. I'll use some Nocturne ink on that. On the chains, I went ahead and used the Twilight ink from the VersaFine Clear line, and that's just a very nice gray. Then I can go ahead and stamp everything down together. It's going to stamp beautifully because I'm using my Misty. I did do a double stamping on that, and there's a closer look at the inside of the card. So just a fun little design. Finishing off the sentiment on the inside of the card is something I like to do a lot, especially when I have a stamp set that's going to coordinate so well like this one does. Now moving on to the next medium, I'm going to be using some inks. You want to use a dye ink for this. A water-based ink is more preferable here. I'm using Catherine Pooler inks here, but I do want to mention too, you can use water-based markers as well. You can also use the re-inkers from your ink pads, and it's all going to work the same. Whatever you have on hand, make it work for this technique. It's so easy and so versatile. You can really use whatever you have on hand. So for my inks, I'm using the Sugared Lavender, Polished, and also the Skylight ink. Again, I'm going for colors that I know are going to blend really well. The only difference between this one and the first panel I did, I'm going to work on cardstock here, plain white cardstock. So I didn't add as much water to this. Whenever I put the inks down onto the palette, I gave them maybe a spritz of water each just to get them reacting a little bit with that water, a little bit more fluid and easier to pick up. And then I'm going to use my plastic bag, dip it into those inks, and start pouncing it over onto the cardstock. Like I said, plain white cardstock, this is heavyweight, it's 110 pounds, so it can hold up to some of that wetness from the ink too. So I'll continue to pounce until I'm happy with the way this background looks. I'm moving from color to color here, and you don't need to use a different baggie for this. The less plastic waste, the better. And this can be used over and over and over again. Because it's plastic, it's that non-porous surface. So whenever you want to switch colors, just wipe it off on a cloth, and you can go right back into the next color. And you don't have to keep wasting and wasting and wasting. And then whenever you're done with this technique completely, you can wipe it off and save it for the next time too. Here's a closer look at both panels. You can see the watercolor panel blended much, much more. The one on the right kind of reminds me of like what those jawbreakers look like. So you get a lot more splotchiness. You do get a little bit of blending, but not near as much because it absorbs into the cardstock so quickly. I love the way they both look. And it really is just about preference and what you want to do. I will say the cardstock was a much more softer look. The watercolor paper was much more vibrant, but that could also have to do with the colors I used on both of them. Now to finish this card off, I'm going to be using another new stamp set from Joy Claire. This stamp set is called Wish Big, and it has some really great images, but also sentiments in it. I am using these two little, like, I guess maybe they're lavender. I don't know. I don't know my flowers, but they look like they're hanging down. So I am stamping these off the cardstock on the left-hand side and also the top onto an oval die cut. This die cut is from a new waffle flower die set. I love this die set. I just bought it. The price is amazing, and the amount you're getting in the die set is phenomenal. Not only that, the ovals themselves go from super teeny tiny to larger than an A2 card base. So, I mean, it's a really good deal. I'll leave it linked down below. Now to finish off this panel, I'm going to stamp some more of those butterflies from the stamp set. I stamped 3 of them. One of them is off the edge of the cardstock just to tie in with that whole theme, and then 2 of them are on the actual panel themselves. I also stamped the Wish Big sentiment from the stamp set. I'm using Memento Tuxedo Black ink for all this because I'm doing some alcohol marker coloring. Now this is super quick coloring. There is really no shading and blending here at all. I'm using my Dick Blick Studio brush markers just like I did before and doing some super quick coloring. I'm using a very light lilac color first, and I'll just quickly color in all of those little flowers that are on the cardstock. Now to add just the tiniest bit of depth, I'm coming in with the darker purple. And the great thing about a lot of Joy Claire stamps, they already have lines in them, so I know where the shading is supposed to be. So no guesswork on my part. And I'm just adding a touch of that darker purple to where those lines are so I can add in that little bit of depth. And then I'm coming back in with the second layer of the lighter color just to kind of blend everything out. It's not going to blend that much, but it will tone it down a little bit and just kind of soak into each other. Now for the butterflies, I'm going with some oranges, a little bit of an in-between yellow, and then a very light yellow. I'm going darkest towards the center and then just feathering these out with some flicking motions on each one of the butterflies. This was super quick coloring. The little bodies themselves, I added some black alcohol marker too. If you don't have a black alcohol marker, you could use a very dark gray. You could even go in with a pen and just fill that in. Super easy, and there's not much really to color there at all. Even a little bit of like Nuvo drops on those bodies would be really cute as well. Now I went ahead and layered up that oval onto a larger one with some dark gray cardstock from Basil. I added that onto the panel itself and then mounted the panel onto an A2 top folding card base. The last finishing touch was some white Nuvo drops, and that was it. Now my final medium is probably my favorite. I love the opacity of this. I am using just some craft paints. Acrylic craft paints, cheap, that I bought at Michael's. I will leave some links down below to some on Amazon that are super cheap as well. But this is probably my favorite. Again, I really love how vibrant and opaque this is, and it just gives another look. You also get a little bit of texture with this technique as well. So I am using some greens and some browns. I've got a few different tones here, and I'm just giving those a little spritz of water. You can thin down your acrylic paint. So if you have a heavy body acrylic paint that you already have on hand and you're thinking, oh, that's too thick, that won't work, just put the tiniest bit down and add water to it. It's fine. It will work for this, I promise. Don't go out and buy anything if you already have something on hand. Now with this, I'm going to do the same exact technique. I added the water to it, mixed it up a little bit, and then I'm dipping in my plastic bag. This is the same one I've used. Now again, this will clean off your plastic bag as long as it's still wet. And even when it dries, it's not going to come off on future projects. So you can just continue to use it until you feel like it's too gummed up that you can't use it anymore. I am just mixing colors here. These dry really quickly, and I do want to mention that I am working on regular cardstock. Again, this is a heavyweight cardstock, so it's going to hold up a little bit better to that water and the liquid that I'm putting on it. Now, these colors are kind of crazy, but I'm going for a football card here. So I wanted this to look like some grass and dirt stains on, like you would see, I see it all the time on like my kids' baseball pants. So that is what the look I was going for here. I'm just going to continue to add bits and pieces here and there, and then when I want some bigger splotches, I'm pressing firmer. When I want a little bit more splattered look, I'm using a lighter hand. Once you get going and get the feel of this, it comes together super fast. And the great thing about this is every time it's going to be a little bit different. So no two cards are ever going to look the same, which I love. So I went ahead and finished that off, and there's a look at that. You can see this gives a little bit more opacity. You've got a little bit more texture because it is a thicker medium we're working with here, and it sits on top of the paper. It doesn't soak in at all. So that's awesome. I really, really love the way this one turned out. Each one has their own place. It just depends on what look you're going for. So to finish this card off, I'm using another new Joy Claire stamp set. It is called Fall Family Football. This has some really great images in it, and I wanted to use quite a few of them and build up a little cluster. So I stamped the goalposts, the football, the trophy, the helmet, and also the little flag there. I use VersaFine Clear Nocturne ink to do that. And that is because I will be using some colored pencils and OMS, Gamsol, whatever you want to call it, to blend this out. Now, I have a whole playlist on different black inks and what they work for. If you ever get lost on that, I'll leave that playlist link down below. It's super helpful just to remember what inks can be used with what coloring mediums, and I still go back and reference my previous experiments to make sure that I'm not going to mess up and have some ink bleeding everywhere whenever I go to color these images in. Now to color them, I am using these Leisure Arts colored pencils. This is for super quick coloring. These are small images. This is a smaller set of colored pencils, so I'm not so worried about having a ton of colors to blend here. And for super quick coloring, I really like to still use these. I keep them in my little Rascog cart in that pencil holder, and it's just super convenient to grab those out and color in my images. Once I was done coloring, I did go in and fussy cut each one of these images because I don't have an electronic cutting machine. If you have one, again, Joy Claire offers those free SVG cut files so you can do what I'm doing without having to put any thought into it. You can use your machine, load them up, and go ahead and cut them that way. Super easy to do, and again, no extra charge. They're free. Now moving on, I wanted to add a little something to my background where I was going to put all of my different images. So I grabbed another stamp from the Fall Family Football stamp set, and it's all these little plays, which I love. And I'm just moving it around, twisting it and turning it, and stamping it on a piece of craft cardstock with my VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink. I went ahead and gathered up all those images and just put them in a nice little cluster on that background. Some I placed down with liquid adhesive, some I popped up with dimensional adhesive. The last final touch was a little happy birthday banner that I placed on with some foam tape, and that finished off the front of the card. The only thing left to do was attach it to an A2 top folding card base, and there you have it, the final card. It's football season here in Iowa, so this one was perfect for this time of year. All right, I want to show you one final look at all the different mediums compared to one another. This is the first one with the watercolor on watercolor paper. The second was the inks, the dye inks on the regular cardstock, which gives you a softer effect than the first one and less blending. The third is the most opaque, and it gives you that little bit of texture, and that is the acrylic paint on regular cardstock. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and a fun little technique. That is going to do it for me today. I want to thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to check out the description box down below. It has a lot of information down there. Thanks for watching today, and happy crafting, everyone.